saturation, let's have a little look. We can make it quite dark. It's not going to be very dramatic, but that's a rather nice image. And then darkening of the lips perhaps. Don't want to do too much of that. And lip contrast. And again, don't want to mess around with it too much because our selection wasn't perfect when we did that. Okay, so perhaps bring down the saturation even. We can paint that in a little bit later. Okay, let's look at the hue. And that will give us all the different colors that the lips can be if you really wanted it to be there. But we're going to keep that perhaps at around just a 1 again, just something like that. Okay, now we can work a little bit with the lighting in here. So we're going to look at that and we're going to up the shadows, which will really wash it out. That's not a bad effect if you want to use it inside the magazine, but I don't think it's quite suitable for the kind of feel that we want. We're not going for the pop art look. We're going for as naturalistic as we can get away with. Okay, let's just have a look at the original and this one. See, same goal, but slightly more suited to what we expect from a magazine front cover. Okay, the relighting here. You can just have a little look at what happens if I do that. Slight variations, especially on this side. Now that's not too bad, and we can change the contrast completely to burn it out again on this side, or to really darken it on that side, but we don't want anything like that. So what we can do is just lighten up the contrast a tiny little bit. Again, look at the original. Okay, a few little shadows under the eyes. Now they almost disappeared. It almost looks painterly what's happened here. You might like that or you might not like that, but this can work as the front cover of a magazine. And again, look at the highlights, and again I'm going to over dramatize so we have something very different there. Let's just bring that back. Okay, so we have a 5, a 90, a -23 and a 0. Let's look at default. We just go for default. See, that's not too bad. It's 26. Maybe change the relight a little bit, bring that down a little bit as we had it. Maybe not so much. See, some green bleeding in there, which is not what we want. Okay, that's quite pretty. Okay. And again, picture controls, we can work on exposure. If you bring down the exposure, of course, it all goes black. If you bring it up, it washes out in this kind of Andy Warhol look, but we don't want that. We want somewhere here in the middle. Maybe something like that. Contrast, the same thing. If you push it up, that's quite pretty, quite dramatic. You can use that as an album cover or something like that. If you bring it to this side, again it changes into something quite cute. But that's not what we want for the front cover. We want somewhere in between. So maybe just a -9 for contrast, because that's quite nice under the eyes. Again, the full shadows. If I exaggerate that, something different happens. Our hair color changes. Again, if I go to the other way, it's quite dark and dramatic. If you want something slightly darker, let's just look at that at -100. There's the original, and there that's gone quite dark. Okay, but that's not exactly what we want. We want something slightly more punchy, so just sneak it up here to maybe a 9.6 maybe. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Saturation is again something we'll play with in Photoshop. Bring it down and she goes black and white. Bring it up and it's all dramatic and almost looks 70s. There's certain films in the 70s that did a similar effect to this, but we don't want something like that. So let's look for something maybe just over 0 to give us that effect. Let's just go back to the original. So we're not doing an awful lot here, but what we are doing seems to make it quite attractive. Okay, and the temperature, of course, you can play with, and it'll make it reddish or it'll make it greenish. So we're changing the color temperature, but again, Photoshop is probably better suited for that. Okay, we've used complexion female for this one, and we've just cleaned up the complexion. Let's look at the two pictures face to face or next to each other, and I think that although she's quite pretty in this one, I think that looks slightly more like a retouched photograph. Perhaps that's not the effect you want, but that's what we've chosen here. Okay, so we're going to save this, and we'll save professional project, if you can say that quickly, and we're just going to save it under the name of the Image Plus PP. Okay, now if we were to go for dramatic, let's just click on dramatic. Now remember what we've seen there. It's quite a dramatic thing happening here. We're almost back to the kind of black and white thing that we had before. Now this is quite nice, isn't it, when you look at it? I mean, there's something more to the eyes. a shape to the mouth, but that is quite in a lot of darkness. So if we look at dramatic and we perhaps just look at lighting, perhaps look at the relighting. Let's look at the shadows, see what happens if I try to up the shadows. See, that's quite pretty. It looks painterly almost. Okay, we're going to leave that up there. Let's relight it. No, that's probably too much. Look at the contrast. Bring that down a little bit. And the highlights. Again, we can play with that. Now look at the original. And this is your quite dramatic. See, we've done the eye shape. We've now chosen a different preset. So we're looking at dramatic female, which is rather nice. Okay, I like everything that's happened there. So we're going to save this one as a project. Okay, and this is the dramatic female one because I rather like what's happening there. Let's just wait for the machine. Has it done that? Save project as. Oh, I think that's changed it. Okay, it's changed it. It's obviously saved it as the dramatic one. Okay, so let's look at the complexion one, which we had before, which is that one. Very, very simple. Just cleaned it up. Okay, if we look at glamour, more sculpting, perhaps, which gives us an option. That gives us a lot of sculpting that's happened with the face here. There, it's probably about as naturalistic as it gets for this image. Let's look at that eye and that eye. Let's perhaps look at the face sculpt controls. Let's look at the left eye. And look at the right eye. See, that's a more balanced space. So you can actually move the eye into something different there. There we go. Let's look at the original. And look at this one. I rather like this one more. Okay, so that's all we're going to change there. Let's just look at our eye controls, and we're going to whiten the eye because we always do just a little bit there. But the eye area we can make big and then just burn it down into something there. Again, keep in mind that shadowy one, which will easily go out, and then sharpen the eye so they really pop out at you. Just going to play with the eye area, bring that down a little bit. Okay, I'm quite happy with that image. This is Glamour More Sculpting, so we're going to save it as, let's call it Glam. More. Okay, so it's Glam More. Keep that space in there, press save, which I rather like. And this will be Glamour Some Sculpting. This will be more subtle than before. So let's have a little look. See, there's only a tiny little bit going on there. Alright, we've changed the eye a little bit, like the nose, got rid of a lot of the kind of freckly bits. There's a few marks left over there, but I rather like this as well. So Glamour Some Sculpting, and again we can save the project, and we call it Glamour Some, because that's the default that we have for Portrait Professional. Okay, and now we have all kinds of other ones. You can make a subtle one, you can remove spots only. If you look at sepia, that's a kind of orangey black and white which used to be done chemically. This is a very, very subtle sepia. Now if you had a black and white cover, as you can see, there's only a faint tinge of sepia going on over there, but we're not going to use it here. And it gives you a black and white version of as well, which is quite dramatic and which you could use, which is rather nice to look at. But we're going to use Photoshop for everything there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to complexion female, which we rather like, which is as undramatic as it gets, quite naturalistic, even a tiny little mark there which we'll clean up later on. We're going to save this as a JPEG. The default is to save it as a TIFF, which is uncompressed and lossless compression in terms of images, and very good to use with, but we're going to work in JPEGs because that's what we used to. So we're just going to save this picture. There's all those little things that we named it before, but it adds PP at the end, and we're going to save it as a JPEG. We're going to work in the highest possible JPEG because that just helps us to get the best possible quality when we work on the final image. So we're saving that, and then we're going to open in Photoshop. We'll be doing some other work on other images in Portrait Professional in further exercises. Okay.